So today we're going to look at stencil creation for a carved piece of slate. I'm using PowerPoint. So from PowerPoint, the first thing we want to do is set our paper size to be the same size as the slate. That gives us a good reference for how big our text will be on the slate and how our graphics will fit. So our slate is 14 by 14. We're going to remove any of the default text that PowerPoint uses on the sheet, so we're working with a blank piece of paper. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to draw our graphics. The graphics is a good reference for the text, so I'm going to use a triangle to represent the mountain. My triangle is filled. I don't want it to be filled, so I'm going to set the border thickness that I want to carve into the slate, and then I'm going to remove any of the fill in the mountain itself, so it'll be an open triangle. Next, what we want to do is we add the text. We're going to place text, and we're going to put line breaks in where we think the text will fit within our triangle. And then change the font size to be large enough that we can carve into the slate, but still fits within the triangle. I like to use 72 size text as a minimum for the main part of the slate. So this one fits in fairly well with 72. I do need to change line spacing because we need to stretch out the text to fit within the triangle, still not be too close to the edge, because as we're carving, we don't want any of the text to hit the edge of the triangle. So I changed my spacing to be 12 points, and it looks like it fits well within the triangle. It's evenly spaced. The text is now good. So I need to add snow cap for the mountain, and I just give myself a reference line and change its weight to match the triangle size. There's an additional piece of text that we need to add. This is for my great nephew Enzo. So I'm going to add Enzo and the year he was born to the bottom of the slate. I use slightly smaller text, and I'm going to space it onto the paper about where I want it to be on the slate. I'm going to put some reference lines on top of the triangle because I have to shrink this down to fit on 8.5 by 11 pieces of paper. That's the limits for my printer. So if I had a 14-inch printer, I could actually print this out the way it is. So I'm going to change the stencil to fit on 8.5 by 11 pieces of paper. So I'm going to remove the larger triangle. I could leave it there if I want as a reference, but in this case, I just need lines on the top of it, and I can draft them onto the slate. So now as I break this down, I duplicate the slide because I'm going to have to do 2 sheets of paper to create this stencil. So I change my paper size back to 8.5 by 11, which is my printer limits. And then I need to make sure it overflows on the paper. Then I can create my 2 different stencils by erasing the contents that I don't need on that page. So the first one's going to have the top of the mountain and the Enzo 2015. So, and I need to leave paper space around the stencil parts so that I can cut them and realign them to recreate the mountain. So for the second sheet, I need to remove what's on the first sheet. So I'll erase those parts and take out that text. Now, if any text goes greater than your 11 limits, I put an underline on it so I have a reference line to realign the text and separate it into multiple pieces, and then I can put it back together on the slate. The stencils are now ready to print. Okay, I printed my stencil out on 8.5 by 11 cardstock, so that allows me less flexibility in the paper itself. My razor knife has a little LED light on it, so it helps with seeing the lines a little bit better. Things we have to worry about mostly is these closed-in letters that have a center. I usually do those by creating 2 tabs that hold the center part together. So I create those tabs, and then I do the interior. Now as I'm cutting, I try not to turn my hand as much as I turn the paper.
That stops me from having to move as many times. I spend more time rotating the paper to get the paper in position. I cut to the center and I stop at those tab marks. And then as I do the outside, I do the same thing. Again, rotating the paper, trying to stay as close to that black line as possible. And as I create each piece, you can push it through, and it may be stuck in the corners, but we can quickly grab that with the razor knife or just peel it off. These razor knives, you do want to use a sharp blade. If the blade gets dull, you'll find that it pulls the paper a little bit more. Other letters that are concerned are the ones that have small areas. So usually what I do with those is I do the inside first. In this case for the G, I'll start on that upper edge. And then as I pull, a lot of times I'll stick my finger in behind the knife so that the paper can't tear. Even though it's cardstock, it will have a tendency to pull, especially on S's and G's. And then you can just follow the letter all the way around. And when you complete it, if you don't pick up the knife, that's the best way. So that's why I'm rotating the paper to get the knife to follow the edge of the G as close as possible. And then when I get towards that last edge, I try to hit it right where I started. So in this case, it's right at the top. And then that G will just pop out of there. You can see that. So we end up with a perfect letter G. For the longer sections, you do the same type of thing, but you need to put sets of those crossovers. So every couple of inches, if you place those, that'll give the strength to it that it needs. And again, I do the inside first, following my edge. A lot of these, you may not need a stencil. You could do it with a ruler if you want. I like to use a stencil for at least part of it, because then it relates to the letters, what I've created. It's a good reminder, and it's a good thing to measure off of when you're centering, because the top of this mountain has to be the center of the slate, so it makes it easier if I have it included with the stencil. So as simple as that. You follow everything around. You may end up with some edges that you need to trim slightly. I usually don't worry about those. You can actually go inside the black if you want. You can avoid stenciling altogether if you're good with lettering. You can just draw lines on the slate and do that from the lines. And if you have a stencil cutter or stencil printer, you can just draft the stencil and then send it to the printer, and it'll actually cut them out for you. And you can avoid the manual piece of this.